We should be live. Thanks for tuning in. This week, for this live stream, what we're going to be doing is revisiting an idea from 2 weeks ago, the last live stream that I did. I was trying to get an idea together for a different documentation design. So right now, the documentation that I do for the Next.js boilerplate and Node.js boilerplate that I have is all on GitHub. It's through the little README thing that they've got built in there, which isn't bad, but it's not my usual thing where I like to dress stuff up and make it look pretty. So 2 weeks ago, we tried to kind of get that going, but the design I had kind of sucked, to be completely honest. And so after that live stream, over the course of the next week, I started to tinker with a new design, and I came up with something a little bit better. And this is what I came up with. So this is kind of a mix of stuff that I've done before, but bringing in some of the new style of cheat code. And once I got about 3/4 of the way through this, I was like, okay, this is what I want to do. And I figured it'd be good to hop on another live stream and try and get this going again. So that's what we're going to do tonight. We're going to start implementing this. And what I've got set up, and I started to spec some of this out earlier, what we're going to do is we're going to use the Next.js boilerplate that I've built for CheatCode. So this is a boilerplate for building the front end of a web app. And what we're going to do is take this and implement the basic UI that we've got mapped out in this design here. And we'll work on the navigation, layout, and all that stuff. So this is going to be pretty heavy on CSS stuff, but we're also going to learn some of the ins and outs of working with Next.js, which will be fun. So if you haven't checked it out already, please do head over to github.com/cheatcode/nextjs-boilerplate. And if you download a copy of that, completely free, MIT license, so you can do whatever you want with it. And I'm actively working on this, so expect a lot of feature development and things like that. Keep an eye on the issues tab if you're curious about what's going on behind the scenes. So I've got that going, but I've also got, and we are technically using this where we may or may not dig into the backend stuff tonight. It depends on where we get here. But I've also got a Node.js server boilerplate, so for the backend of your application. And the idea here was, well, I like the power of Next.js from the build tool side. I like how the routing's set up. I like how easy the builds are because they've got Webpack pre-configured and all that stuff. And that package combined with having a separate Node.js backend just really worked out. So that's why I've got two separate ones. And what I'm doing right now on my computer, I've got the, let's see, yeah, you can see it. So I've got the Node.js server boilerplate running the backend for tonight. And by backend, basically, I just mean a connection back to a MongoDB database just for prototyping. And then on the front end, we're running the Next.js boilerplate. And this is freshly cloned. So I released a new version this morning. Yeah, it was this morning. And I added authenticated and public route components. So what that means is if you have a page in your application that's only intended for authenticated or logged in users, you can wrap that component with this component. So when I say this component, what am I? Oh, that's the Node.js. We want Next.js. So you wrap it with this authenticated route component. And what this will do is automatically handle the redirect based on the user's logged in status. And then it's got a complementary version of that on the public side. So if you want to redirect people away from things like the sign up page if they're already logged in. So making good progress on that. Again, if you haven't already, clone a copy, play with it. I'm always open to feedback, always open to notes. It helps me move this stuff along a little faster. But other than that, that pretty much does it in terms of housekeeping. So what I want to do is go ahead and get us started getting this implemented. So like I was saying, we're going to use the Next.js boilerplate. And I think I did this after I did this after the last live stream. So before I was using a very, very early alpha of the UI framework that I want to do for cheat code in the Next.js boilerplate, but I realized that that was going to be confusing for folks. So between now and whenever I get the beta or an actual production ready version of that ready for folks, I'm just using Bootstrap. So what you see here is Bootstrap 5, and I believe this is whatever the latest beta is. I don't know if I have it in here. I don't think so. I think I did it through. Oh, no, I do. Okay. So this is saying 453 here, and then I think I've got, is it in document? No. Where did I put Bootstrap? Maybe that's right, 453. I might have downgraded it just so it was on a latest major version. Yeah, that looks right. So one of the later versions of Bootstrap. So this is whatever the current version is right now. So the good news is we're going to completely get rid of this because that doesn't fit our design at all. So I'm basically going to rip out Bootstrap in this case, and we're going to do this pretty much from scratch here. And if you are watching, make sure to ask any questions you might have in the chat. I'll keep an eye on, I'll kind of flip back and forth here as we go, but yeah, let's do this. So the first thing I want to do is go ahead and get rid of Bootstrap because we don't need it in this case. And what was the directory I used on this? I did docs. So we're going to do this. Make sure you guys can see this. Hopefully that's big enough. So we're going to cd into docs, and then I'm really dubious about where Bootstrap. So let's just do a global search and see. No, I am. Okay, so I am using the npm package. So this is in the app component. So this is like the main root app that Next.js renders for us, and I'm importing Bootstrap directly from the npm package there. So we're going to start by just commenting that. And this is something that I'll typically do when I'm doing big reconstructions or re-architecting of something, is I'll basically say, okay, don't get rid of that yet, because you might screw something up and you might need to come back. So until I'm absolutely certain that's what I want to do, then I will not do that. Yeah, see, and it looks like there is Bootstrap somewhere else. So there's that one. There's this. Oh, yeah, because of the Bootstrap JavaScript through jQuery. Though that doesn't look right. Let's see here. We might just do npm uninstall. You think I'd remember this because I just did it. Am I in? Hold on a second. I am in the correct project. See, because I do stuff like this. I think I opened something. Let's make sure. Maybe not. Maybe I'm leading everybody astray, and that would make some sense here. I think what project was I looking at? Oh, I'm looking at the CMS for CheatCode because I was making a change right before I jumped on. See, I'll get you in trouble. So, rewinding here. Let's go back into Pages, App. Yeah, okay. And I'm doing the same thing because the CheatCode CMS is built with the same tools that you get access to. Okay, so we're going to comment that out. And now that means that, yeah, I did. Okay. This is the fun of a beta here. Always moving stuff around and forgetting what you did. There we go. Okay. Good and ugly. So, like I said, I'm going to leave those temporarily in case we want to reference something. But let's jump over to our design. So, for something like this, this is going to be heavily reliant on Flexbox because we've got our left column and we've got like our content half. And a lot of this, though it looks like you've got a column on the left and then content on the right, technically I'll split this into multiple components. So I'll do it like in rows. So I'll go from top to bottom in rows. So I'll basically say, okay, the top row is going to be the box for my logo and current location in terms of the page we're looking at and the search doodle up here. Next row will be documentation title, breadcrumbs, so on and so forth. So we'll just stack it that way. And then as we stack it, we'll split it with that. So visually it'll look like it's just two columns, but technically in the code it'll look a little bit different. So where I'm going to start, let's close those for now. And under pages, I'm going to add, well, this is a good question. So right now we don't really care. So we're just going to use, I don't think I have an index in here, so let's just add one of those. Use a little snippet I've got here. And if you haven't already, this is on my perpetual to-do list, but that little snippet I just typed, RSF, this is how I do a lot of my boilerplate code is I use snippets that are built into VS Code. And what's on my to-do list is to make this accessible to people who are subscribed to CheatCode Pro. So if you haven't checked that out yet, it's $5 a month. It gives you access to all of the GitHub repos for the free tutorials on the site. So all the tutorials on the site are free to read, but if you want to view the source code, you got to be a CheatCode Pro member. And it also gives you access to the CheatCode Discord. So I'm usually hanging out in there. So if you have questions about your project or something that you're trying to build and figure out, it's a good place to hang out and get some help. So my goal is to add all of the snippets that I use to that. I need to go through them and clean them up because I don't want to give them to you how they are right now. But once I do that in the next week or two here, that'll be a nice perk if you haven't signed up for that yet. So what we're going to do, we'll just call this index. And this is just going to be kind of rough right now because I don't really care too much about the location or the naming. I just want to get something designed. And I'm going to use styled components for this. So we're going to import, and the like I said, the naming is going to be off here. Don't take this as like, yeah, this is the way to do it. Because this is just me roughing out the idea. And likely what we will do, there's another snippet, style components. So what I'm doing right now is just setting up the basic wrapper component for the whole UI. And we will render that as the root of the index. Let's say testing. And then let's go back to the index. Style docs. Styled docs. So this is what I like Next.js. It's all fast and snappy. There we go. Okay, so we've got our navigation still, which for this we do not want. So we're going to go, is that an app? I think that's an app. Yeah, there it is. So again, just like I did earlier with the bootstrap stuff, I'm just going to comment it out. I don't trust myself until I'm absolutely certain that I've done what I wanted to do. Though that's kind of a tiny one. So let's look, because it looks like we've got some weird spacing. Body, okay. So let's go and nuke that. That is, it looks like in our global styles. If I search for it. Yep, there it is. All right, so that I'm not even gonna comment. I'm just gonna get rid of because we don't need any of that. And it looks like we're doing the same thing here. So I'm going to keep the selector here because we might need that in a little bit, but with different settings. But for now, I just want this to get as tight to the top left corner. And that looks correct because that's just taking on the default browser style. So when I'm doing a from scratch design, so I'm not using a framework, one of the things that I'll do, and there's a few different of these, but since I'm old, I use this Eric Mirror reset, and that was kind of mean to Eric Mirror. Because this is brilliant. I forget when this came out. So this one's dated 2011, but this CSS reset, which is just like a bunch of base CSS styles for resetting the browser. So what I mean by that is, like, you look here, this is saying user agent style sheet, and so in any web browser that you use, by default, frustrating as it is, there's a default style sheet. So somebody at Google Chrome, or in this case I'm using Brave, somebody authored that style sheet. And I think this is technically like the default WebKit style sheet. But the way to get around that when you're trying to do styling is to use a reset, which, like the name implies, resets all of those things before you actually apply your own styles. And so Eric Mirror was, I think, the first person to ever write a reset. And since then, and that was like 2006 or 7. Since then, he's put out new versions, and then other people have done their own resets. So the nice thing, if you can see it here, let me beef this up a little bit. Let me make sure you can see this. Yeah, you can see it. Okay, so what this has done is it's kind of like sucked it into the top corner. So what that tells me is, like, okay, I'm not dealing with any like funky margins or padding or anything that's going to confuse me later. It's just saying, like, okay, this is absolutely from scratch, which comes in handy when you're doing complex layouts with something like this, because you don't want to be like, you know, like, why the hell is this thing shifted down 10 pixels? I didn't set it to 10 pixels. And then you start throwing stuff around the room. That's how that goes. So now that we've got a reset, we can actually do some work. So the first thing is layout. And what I mean by that is actually markup, because we need the code in there to actually style it. So like I was saying, we're going to think about this in rows. So yeah, let's do header, and then we'll do that as a subheader, and then we'll do a main. So subheader. And if you're like a HTML stickler in terms of semantics, I try and get this as close as I can. But often I break the rules just because. So what I'm doing right now is I'm thinking about the divs in terms of the structure of that design. So here, this part is going to contain our logo. And we'll need to pull that in. I think it's just cheat code. And then let's see here. This one, I'm gonna call it an H4. And when I do this stuff for the first pass, I'll just put in static data. I don't fuss with like trying to wire this up for real the first time, because it's just too much to think about and pretty overwhelming. So this, do I have a search? No, I don't. So we're gonna make one. Do we want to do that as a component? I think we do, because we're gonna do something fancy. And what I mean by fancy, I think I talked about this in the last stream. We want stripe.com docs API. Oh yeah. Okay, so the fancy thing I want to do is something like this. So like you focus on the search input and it pops up with a fancier one. And what I'm thinking is we'll separate our search input into a component. And we'll do that because we'll actually add that overlay functionality in there, and separating it off keeps it a little more organized. So we'll say index. And again, you'll see me do this a lot. One of the big tenets of how I do stuff is I try and keep everything as consistent as possible. So I'm always using the same exact snippets as much as I can, the same exact tools, unless there's an extenuating circumstance where I don't have a choice. I have to use something different, just because it means that the speed at which I can jump between projects and solve problems just multiplies tenfold. It's kind of a BS number, but it feels like it, because whenever I jump between code bases that are like using different patterns or inconsistent patterns, it always just makes my brain freak out. So on this one, we're going to say import styled search input. And again, same exact thing, do style component, and we'll say styled search input. And we can just say styles.js, same thing. Say div. And this is actually going to have quite a few edges to it. And that's the word that I like to use, like when I'm thinking about like what are all the details of this, I'll say like this has a lot of edges to it. So I'm going to say text, say placeholder else. So the reason I did it this way is I want to add a separate icon, because I absolutely loathe the default search input that you get in browsers. Like it just looks kind of meh. Okay, so let's see, where are we at here? We gotta import it. And then we'll start having some fun. Hopefully you're having fun. Where am I? There we go. And like the kids say, let's yeet that onto the page. That absolutely cracks me up. I love that word. I know it's got some, connotations, but it's a good one. Style search input. Okay, so do we have it rendered? We do. And now this is where we start to have some fun. So the reason I did it that way is we're going to set the wrapper to position relative. And we're going to say input. Actually, input's fine by itself, but we will style it. And usually what I'll do, instead of just saying input, I've been burned by that before, I'll use the bracket syntax in CSS, and that allows you to select based on an HTML attribute. So I'll say, find me the input where the type is text. And if you want to be really hardcore about it, you could do like input. So I'm going to say border, 1 pixel solid. Actually, I think in here I call it gray 1, something like that. Yeah, that appears to be the case. Okay, and then next thing we're gonna do is grab that icon. So we're gonna say if I search, and this is why I had to wrap it in that div and set position relative on the div, is because I want the search icon to stay within the bounds of the entire box, but not merge it or mesh it with the input. Technically, I can't even do that. So doing a wrapper around both the input and the search icon allow me to do that. So we're gonna say that, and then we're going to say top 0, right 0 to start, but we'll actually position it. And it looks like our input, yeah, it doesn't have a width on it, so we're going to say width 100%, and we'll set it to display block. And then in terms of the actual width, we'll position it later. There we go. And let's do, where am I here? So we've got header. Yeah, let's give this a little bit of space just so I can see things easier. So don't need you, we need you. So I'm gonna say header padding, and this is where I gotta be careful and make sure I'm doing this. So I'm using Sketch for this. This is similar to something like, what do people like to use? Figma. There's another one I always forget the name of. But design program. So what I'll do is I'll check the spacing of my design, and usually it's off. So I'll just say like, oh, well, that looks to be about 40 pixels. So I'll set that. And I should clarify right now, I'm only concerning myself with desktop browsers. I'm not going to worry about mobile right now. I'll do that later because that's usually a bit nitpicky. And we're going to say border bottom. See, that black light is what I use inside of the rest of the cheat code stuff. So I should do that here, but for the sake of time and speed, we'll just rip through this. Okay, and I'm noticing another semi-mistake here. So the header is this. Yeah, so we're going to change this. It is not going to be header that gets that. Header gets the border bottom. But we're going to say header div, and I could do first child and last child. I could say div colon first dash child, but I'm going to say nth child, just on the off chance that I decide to add extra stuff up here. It's very unlikely, but a nice way to stay flexible. And I'll say the same thing with the second one. Actually, we don't even have to do that. We can just say header div, because we know that it's always going to apply to that. And when I use that little greater than symbol, what I'm saying is select only the most immediate sibling or child, most immediate child of the header. That's a div. So that way, if you have nested divs or something like that, it's not going to screw up your design. So now we want to say both of those have padding 40. I think this is what my brain was trying to do, but it was skipping ahead. So we already know that the first one, the logo box, has a border right. So I'm going to add that now. Same thing there. So the thing we need to do is say display flex on the header, and that's going to kick those two divs next to each other. There we go. So hopefully you can see that. Border should be dark enough. So we're starting to get the very rudimentary layout that we've got back over here. Still looks kind of crappy, but you know, everything starts crappy and then it gets better. At least in terms of programming. I guess other things in life don't. Hopefully don't start crappy. So why did I do that? I said nth child 2. I saw something. Oh, that needs to be display flex as well, because I don't want those stacked. And then we're going to tell the search input, and the way we're going to do it is back in the search input component. Because we're using a style component, it's getting a randomly generated, let's see if we can see it, randomly generated class name. So it gets this garble of, and that is just for the sake of efficiency, but also because it's all dynamically generated by style components for you. So something that I will do if I'm wrapping a style component with other CSS or another div that has CSS, I'll give it a class name as well. So in this case, I'm going to say search input. And I want to do that because, let's get this, stop that. Let's get this over here. So the reason I'm doing that is because I want to tell that search input to go over. So I'm going to say header, and we'll do div again, and then I'm going to say search input. And technically I could get really hardcore and say nth child 2, but generally speaking, if I only have one of that element and I know that's all I'm going to have, then I'll just leave it as is. So in this case, I'm going to say margin left auto. And does this have width? No, it does not. So it may be width auto. So if I do this in the browser and I say width 100%, yeah. So notice how the search input jumped over here. That was because its parent, when I added that style, took up the full width. So now we got to go back to our actual code and add that. So div nth child 2 with 100%. And this is actually a good thing to run into because you can see our logo box is getting smushed. So what I'm going to do, and if you're on a Mac, this is the way that I do this. One of the ways I do this. What am I holding down? It's all muscle memory. Command-Shift-4 brings up the screenshot tool, but what's cool about it is it gives you crosshairs that also show you the pixel width and height. So I'll use this to do measurements on the fly. So in Sketch, I'll do it for the padding. I'll look in the app, but with this, like the full width and height of something, I'll do it this way. So I'm less concerned about the height in this case and more about the width. So it's like 395. So what I'm going to do is say that one is width 100%. So that should take up the remaining entirety of the header. And then this one I'm going to say width is 395 pixels. There we go. And let me zoom out for a sec just so we can see. So it looks bigger than it actually is. So that's now we need the logo in here. So let's, where do I have that? That's not what I want. There we go. The site. The thing you guys look at. We should have a logo in there. And that appears to be it. And since it's SVG, we'll just copy and paste it. And what did I call it in the header? Cheat code. So let's change it to logo. Save that. Come over here. SVG still blows my mind. I mean, it makes sense. Like it's just data, but like it's cool that you've got like a kind of React-y or XML style way to do it. I wonder if there's anybody who can actually like write this from top of mind. That'd be kind of crazy. Okay, so our logo width is, and this is another Sketch one. So Sketch in the inspector gives you a width of an element when you select it. So for some reason 176 bothers me, so I'm going to say 175. And this is typically how I'll do this. So once I, like my designs, the way I treat them is not necessarily to get it pixel perfect, it's to get it pixel approximate. So I'll typically tweak values as they're represented in my design program differently in CSS. And that's just to get it to look right and get the feel right as it actually exists in the browser. Because there's always going to be like a little 1 to 2% difference in how the values work out. And then you factor in the whole responsive design nightmare, and well, there you go. So this one, I did as an image tag, yeah. I had to think about that because I didn't import the SVG. And there's no real specific reason. Typically I like the image tag because it tells my brain like this is an image, whereas if I see it rendered as a React component, I think like, oh, it's a component. So we said 195, I believe. That's starting to look right. And just for good measure, I'm going to say height auto because I know images are a little finicky. And the other thing I'm noticing is that on this box, padding 40 doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So we are going to change this. Looks closer to like 20 on top and bottom. Is that right? Yeah, that was kind of stupid. I did it based on this one, but I should have done it based on the logo. Yeah, okay, this one's way neater. So we'll say 25. And we'll do it all around like that. So I'm going to comment that. Oh, okay, I did it because of the alignment of the breadcrumbs, and we could probably sneak that in a little bit. Oh yeah, quite a bit. What's that at? 25. That's fine. And the reason it was so far over is because when I first did this, I had my content over here, and that will not fly. But I centered it, so now you can get away with better up there. Okay, so I take it back. We're going to uncomment this, set that to 25, get rid of that, and now we should be looking a little closer to the actual design. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so the next thing that I just noticed is we want to make sure we're leveraging align item center, and this is a flexbox property that makes sure that the vertical, well, depends on your flex direction. So by default, it's going to be the vertical alignment. So if you want it centered vertically, it's going to do that. And the reason I say flex direction, so you can technically change how Flexbox will lay something out. So if I say flex direction column, now it's all screwed up. So by default, we're set to flex direction row, and that's what gets everything moving horizontally. So now we're making some progress. So let's get this cleaned up because that's an easy peasy one. What is that? 20. And I don't have all my typefaces in here, so this might end up looking a little goofy. Oh, I have it in the site. The site is going to be our savior today. Did I close it? Yeah, I did. But I don't remember exactly how I pulled the font in. There you are. And I just put this. Oh, okay. Yeah, so say, there you go. That's what I was talking about. So this is a similar pattern in a completely separate project. So I'm still using CSS reset. I've got my main index CSS file. So everything is roughly in the same place, which means that I can quickly jump in and say, okay, this is what I'm looking for. Spend a few minutes moving it over to the new project and keep cruising on that one. So in this case, we're going to jump into styles, and it looks like I put that beneath the reset. So that's the reset. And then we need to pull our font files. And technically, oh, we do need IBM Plex, right? Because this is going to be branded just like the site, so we want both. So that works out. where is this? Public fonts? Yeah. So will the computer be a bro and let us copy the fonts folder? It will. Okay, and then we also are going to be needing this. So what did I do? Ah, that's what I did. Okay, so I've got all of my H tags set to the active grotesque font, and then I've got my body copy set to IBM Plex Mono. So we'll copy those. And can we get away with that entirely? I think I'm going to change the background color of the site, but I'm not sure. So we'll get rid of that for now. That we don't need because of our reset. There we go. Snap 2. So that font size is off. So what did I say? 20 pixels. Close that. I always like it when things just work on the first try. Okay, now I actually have to think. So div. And even though it seems a bit excessive, I am going to just say what I call H4. And with stuff like this, you'll notice that I'm doing this hard-coded or manually for this specific element. So I'm aware of things like design system and things like that, and I think they're good. But they can add a lot of cognitive overhead to what you're doing, which means that you can get yourself into a bit of a rabbit hole. And I did that. So I was doing, I know his first name's Brad, the guy who invented atomic design. Brad Frost. So I played with this a few years back, and I got super sucked into it. But then I started to think about everything. He talks about this concept of like atoms and nucleus and things like that. And I was just like geeking out on it. But I found myself being like, oh, well, what kind of atom do I need to do for this? And I'd spend like 3 hours and still my design would look like this. So I said like, okay, learn to balance that stuff and incorporate it when it makes sense. If you're working on like a really big project, but if it's just kind of something ad hoc like this, just get the work done. And if you want to codify it into a kit later or a design system later, then go for it. Okay, so this search input is still looking a little booty. So let's go back and clean this thing up. So what's the height? The height's 52. The width is, we'll call it 260. So I'm going to say width 260, and then I'm going to set the actual height on the input, and that's because the input's going to drive the height of the actual thing that they're typing into, but the width of this, meaning the outer parent div, is going to control the width of the input, technically, because we're just telling the input to take up 100% width of its parent. All right, it's at 52. Yeah, it looks right. And then that border is different. Where is it? Sometimes there it is. There is no chance that that is 1 pixel. That's 2 pixels. See, everybody has bugs. Sketch has been around for like, good lord, 10, 12 years now. Probably longer than that, actually. Yeah, that looks closer. And then I'm also noticing the border radius. And I instinctively did 3 because that's usually what I do. Is it 3? It is 3. So you gotta tick like a clock. Makes life simpler. Sometimes boring, but definitely simpler. What are we doing here? Oh, I'm looking at the position of that. So let's do this in the browser and then we can just copy it. Oh, is that 20? That sounds right. 20. I bet. And so what I'll do, well, see, that looks like crap. Yeah, that's 10. So that's how I'll do that is I'll say like, okay, well, ideally I can get it to be even values on top and the side. But in this case, it looks like it's, you know, running away from home. So I'll scoot it in by 10, still divisible by 20. So mathematically your eye doesn't freak out, but visually it looks way better. And then let's also dim that thing a little bit. Just got too many trophies on the shelf. We're underachievers in this family. All right. I hope nobody says that to their kids. We're underachievers. All right. Font size. 16. Yeah. And then what's the... We gotta set the font family too. So it's 15. That's a weird one. 15, 20. Oh, let's center it. There we go. There we go. 15 and 20. I have a feeling I'm missing a style here. Box sizing. Yeah, because we cleared out this. So this is, now I'm back in the site CSS for a second as a reference. Let's go into here. Yep. So box sizing is another one of those cute default browser styles that makes me want to claw my friggin' eyes out. But thankfully, probably 10 years ago now, they implemented this box sizing property. So it snaps things back into their sizing. And I'm not really an expert on this, but like it's something with the way the browser by default calculates the box sizing, like the actual physical size of a div on screen. It's like it adds the height and width of the padding to make the width right. That's why when I set 15 and 20 pixels on the input, it blew it up. It's because the width and height of the element was being extended not just by the width and height we set, but also the padding in the margins. So it looked goofy. And we'll notice that our search icon dipped a little bit, and now that explains why our measurements were off in terms of the spacing, because that should have been even. 15 there. See, these are the things. I'm real obsessed about 17. Oh, that makes my eye twitch, but it looks right. Say 17, what did I say, 15? Yeah. Okay. Starting to get some documentation. Hopefully you're enjoying this. Looks like I've got one person here. Hope you're having fun. If you're having fun, let me know in the chat. I'm having fun. So why are you goofing? Because our div is display flex, but we need to do that align item stuff again. There we go. Yeah. Starting to get some documentation. I like it. And then mobile shouldn't be too bad with this. Work through it. All right, so now we are cruising. So let's go next into the subheader. And we already know the pattern here, so we know. So we'll say documentation title is a class. And in terms of, if you're curious about like, do you use any methodologies or anything? No. I tried to use BEM and stuff like that. And it was similar to the atomic design thing where it's like, I got way too into it and I got distracted from doing the actual thing. So really I'll just try and use, what's it's not from him, but Uncle Bob Martin, old school programmer who's done, you know, everything, you know, that any of us have done and then some. He's got, I don't think it's his saying, but somebody he works with has this idea that code should read like well-written prose, like you're reading a book. So when I come up with names, I try and spell it out like, oh, that's the subheader, that's the documentation title. Like I try and make it readable instead of doing something like, oh, doc title or doc T or something like that. Like try and spell it out like I was having a conversation with somebody, and that makes styling a little bit easier. So in this case, we've got documentation title and breadcrumbs. And we'll just go ahead and mock that out now so we can just jump to the CSS. And this, I'm going to use the link component from, whatchamacallit, Next.js. And I think this is in next/link. Yeah. And this is just a browser router, so it ensures that when you click on a link, it doesn't do a full page refresh. So I think it's just href as the prop, and then we just say, so right now we don't really care. We're just making stuff up. So we'll say documentation getting started. So this is, we won't actually put documentation first. That was just me testing, because this is for like subtopics if something's nested. So let's just say topic getting started, because we just need it there for design's sake. Okay, so we got topic getting started. And then, oh right, I'm still doing the subheader. Take a little, there we go. So let's see here. This guy, okay, so subheader is going to be almost identical to this. So I'm going to snag that. And hopefully it's self-explanatory, but the way that I tend to do my CSS is I try and cascade it. So I match, like, okay, if I've got this header box or header element at the top of the page, then I've got the subheader div, I'll organize my CSS in the same way. So if it's at the top of the page, it should be at the top of my style sheet, so on and so forth. That should, yep. And then we've got this, and this is what I was talking about earlier. These are going to match. Oh, we don't want that. That's not the right one. This one. So we'll say subheader, border right width. Okay, so this is the cuteness of Flexbox, because this is flexing. So I'm going to say min width. I think that's what Flexbox likes if you're trying to set a fixed one. Yeah, there you go. And we need to make sure that subheader has display flex. And we'll just do this now before I forget. Alright, but we got some margin. What is that? Oh, that's gonna drive me absolutely bananas. I don't know if you can see it. There's like a 5-10 pixel gap. And it's not the title. It's the breadcrumbs. Well, I'm gonna ignore it for a second because it might get straightened up by other styles. Let's see here. So, and you know what? I just realized I'm using these nth child one things, which is kind of confusing, and we just gave these classes, so let's put those to use. So this documentation title, and then we're also going to have breadcrumbs. And I'm actually just typing this to type it. No, I'm not. That's why I did that. And I'm not display flexing that. I'm doing the UL because that's the thing that actually has the style. I'm going to say list style none on that. Margin 0. That might actually be where that gap is coming from. But it shouldn't with the reset. No, it was. I closed it up. Alright, so we're say breadcrumbs, ULLI. Margin left. Now we might try and do something hackery here. Because part of the design is that we've got this little chevron in between each element. And there's two ways I can do it. I can do it the lazy way, which is to, and it's kind of sloppy to be honest, is inject an LI tag that has nothing but the icon in it. But I can also use CSS pseudo attributes. Yeah, why not? Let's have some fun. So we'll say ULLI, that's not the last child. Yeah, not the last child. We're going to say what? We're going to say, so if it's a CSS pseudo attribute, we need content. We're going to fill that content in, say in block. I'm just going to say give it 10 pixels on the other side. Now, there's a trick here. And usually I do it through the inspector. So we have a search icon from Font Awesome. And this is how they actually implement. Yeah. So they use this content key. What am I looking for? I'm looking at this. Font Awesome free. Ah, I'm also getting this wrong. It's a pseudo attribute. So we need to say not last child after. And the before and after technically don't matter, but I think when it renders it in the DOM, it actually does show element, pseudo element before, pseudo element after the actual rendered thing that it's attached to. And in case you've never seen that, pseudo elements are like the name implies. They don't technically exist on the page. They just exist in memory in the DOM. So it's just dynamically injected by the browser through the style sheet into the DOM. So it can look like an element, but it's technically not taking up any markup space. Do they still have the Font Awesome cheat sheet? Yes. And the reason I did this is they give you this nice set of codes for all this stuff. And we want a chevron right. There it is. F054. And what's the syntax? Backslash. So we should be able to do that. Something's in there. Where are you? Content's in there. Font should be correct. If I say display lock. Might be a bust. What am I forgetting? There's a trick. So I did do that. I changed the after. Set the content. You have to set the content. You have to set a display. Let me make sure it's just the font. So if I say test. Yeah, okay. So it is applying. Maybe that's not correct. So what I'll do before I give up on this, do they do it with that or do they do it? Font awesome 5 free. You know what I can also do is copy the ASCII. Nah. All right. This is a distraction. So I'm going to table this. And if I table stuff, I'll comment it and keep it in line until I can think about it later. So we're going to do the quick and dirty way. And for the sake of now, I'm going to say, I'll just change it to chevron. And then we can style it a little easier in the CSS. So now I'm actually kind of curious, does this show up normally? Oh, well, duh. How does this one set it up? F054, what did we have? F054, okay. But they did it as a before, not an after. It's definitely showing up, but it's not rendering. Maybe it's a... No, because the parent has it. Font weight. Yep. Wow, okay. That was a crapshoot. But I will take it. Wonder why. Because it should have defaulted. The reason, my expectation was that because we're using the free font awesome and it has the built-in like default style, it should have just defaulted to that. But for some reason, oh, because of our reset. Yeah, because it would have reset all the elements on the page. So whatever the default is wouldn't have kicked in. So. All right, so now let's go back to after on that and see if we get the same thing. We should. Yeah, okay, cool. Yeah, it was worth it. But, yeah, we don't want to do that. So we're going to let all the space of the list items be driven by those chevrons. Yeah, there we go. 15 should look right. And then the other thing we're going to do is make sure our UL has a line item center, and that'll make sure the baseline of everything is correct. That's still a little off. So what I'm going to do is say position relative on this. Shift it down by about a pixel. Yeah, there we go. All right, and then this is the gray one. Good. Yeah. Yeah, okay. And now we can keep moving here. This we can get rid of. That should be a little darker than the chevron. And did I do those? Those are in active grotesque. So I'm going to say font film. We're still streaming here. Everybody's working as expected. Yeah. Getting into it this time. Last time I was all nervous, but for some reason this time I'm just like, let's do this. There it goes. And we're going to get rid of the text decoration. And I didn't really come up with a style. Yeah, that color's off. And those should be grayed out for the sake of hierarchy. So we're going to say 2. Yeah, and I think that'll end up looking better in context. So what I'm going to do is add a temporary I don't want blue. It says warning. Looking for the cheat code yellow. I don't like that. So we'll call it gray 3 on hover. There we go. Okay. So now subheader is missing a border bottom. So let's just copy that. And now we're talking. So we are, let's try and get these side by side. Not bad. Not perfect, but not bad. And like I was saying earlier, this is the goal. It's like, don't worry about perfection. Just try and get the rough elements first, then go back. So what I teach people when I work with them one-on-one, but also just in my head as I'm doing this stuff, is I think in coats of paint. So I always try and say, get the first coat of paint, then go on to the next later. So let your brain process each level independently, and that helps with overwhelm or controlling overwhelm, so you don't get as overwhelmed thinking about a massive project. You just think, you know what, my first goal is just to get a basic layout on page. Next goal is to get the colors right. Next goal is to get the routing right at the back end level, and so on and so forth until you get it done. And that helps immensely. At least it's helped me. That looks wrong. Did I set that correct, or is it just the size of the browser? Oh, yeah, I got that completely wrong. Let's fix that real quick. Added 20 pixels. There we go. Okay. A little more proportionate. So now we want to get that, and then we're getting into the nav and the actual content. Pretty good. How are we doing? About an hour. I don't know how long I'm going to go here. I'm pretty good on energy, so I'll just keep going until I get tired, but, you know. If there's anything you want to know or any questions, definitely pop them in the chat and let me know. All right, so let's see here. We're going to turn that into something. What are we going to turn it into? So I did it as that, but this, I'll call it an H2. Should be an H1 because you want the title to be. But again, like I was saying earlier, I'm not too preoccupied. Okay, so that's good. I actually tricked myself. I thought I was looking at the browser when I had the design up. So that's, we're moving in the right direction with this. So let's do, and actually let's get this reorganized. There we go. Yeah. So what was I saying? I was saying I changed it to an H2. Yeah. So I'm not worried about semantics right now. I just want to get it working. Say active. Grotesque. Yeah. Okay. I think that's the same. Oh no, that's way too big. 18. Yeah. All right, so let's actually use a real title. So this is another thing that I'll do, is make sure that I'm using real data. So, and I try to make ridiculous data up too. So I'll say like Next.js boilerplate and something that won't exist. Yeah, so like that, just showed a layout bug in the CSS, so we got to make sure we have a max width as well as a min width. And again, the reason we have to do it that way is because of the flex box, because it's always going to try and adapt the children to the parent. There we go. That's what I was expecting. And the reason I did it, if you look, the line height on the text is horrible, so I want to make sure that on the off chance that I have something that's that long, we've got it spaced out correctly. About 26. That's a little better. And again, shouldn't happen, but could happen, so you want to make sure you're thinking about it. All right. Good stuff. So, let's see here. Next is navigation. And I was thinking about what did I say earlier? Oh, do a main. Yeah. So we'll do main, because this is the main content page. We'll have the aside for the navigation. Actually, I take that back. Main is the content itself. Yeah. And then this we'll just make as a div. I'm reluctantly going to call it that. I don't know why that bothers me. Documentation body. I guess that's true. Because this will be documentation content and nav, which make up the body of the page. Yeah, okay. So documentation body is display flex. So we're going to say documentation body aside. And now this is the cool part about doing it this way, is patterns start to repeat, and so your job gets a little bit easier. So again, when it comes to designs, you want to avoid a lot of bespoke gadgets and widgets and all kinds of stuff, because it just adds stress to the project, and it actually creates more likelihood for bugs, or like layout bugs, CSS bugs, and also depending on what you're building with, like actual scripting bugs, so like something like React, because it's just there's so many little nuances or little details that are overlapping on each other that it's far easier. But if it's the simpler you can get it and the more consistent you get it, the happier you're going to be, because it just goes a lot faster to build it, and it also doesn't break on you. And I say that as somebody who used to, you know, go way over the top with UIs. I learned my lesson. Okay, so this is going to be somewhat similar in terms of margin, but now we're going to get into more specific stuff. So, because I remember this part of the design. So we got like 25 and 30. Okay, that's very similar. So we're going to say padding, 25 pixels. Okay, and notice that the height is clipped on this, though we would expect it to go the whole height. So what I'm going to try to do, though this usually causes overflow issues. So 100% vertical height, yeah. Now there's two ways to solve this. And what I'll typically do is say, well, I do want it to take up, well, let me see before I say that. Yeah. So what we're going to do is a calc. And what that means, so that's 76, and that's, no, really, 103. So I pull up this guy, 76, 103, 179. So we're going to say height on this, and then we're going to use the calc function in CSS. Say, well, we want it to be 100 VH, but we want to subtract from that height. What would I say? 179. We're going to subtract the height that's pushing it down. And I'll turn this on and off so you can see the difference. Set the correct number. Oh, it's close. So you're missing the pixels. 2 pixels? No. $182. So what I'm looking for, hopefully you can see this, but over on the far right corner of my screen, I'm looking for the scroll bar appearing, because if that appears, that means we have an overflow. So if I do 182, you'll notice that the scroll bar goes away, which means that the page is no longer overflowing, which means that the height is correctly taking up only 100% of the remaining space available. And there are other ways of doing that, but the reason I like that is it makes it very precise and you know why it's happening, because it's deliberate. It's not random calculations. And that's another one of those things that can cause trouble when you're layering all this stuff together. So right now we don't have a lot on the page, so it's not the end of the world if I did something like that. But later, as I start to add all kinds of elements and we populate the navigation and all that, it can really spin your head insane. So I try to avoid that. And that, now I know it's like, oh, well, I can just search in my code for that later. I don't have to guess, like, why is this element doing what it's doing? Trying to think, what do I want to center this out? Kind of. But that navigation looks cool, so let's do that. Yeah. So we've got ULs and we've got a floater for the active state. So we're gonna say, I don't know if you can tell, but I'm getting fidgety. Usually when I stand while I'm working for a long time, I get fidgety. Ooh, I gotta be careful with this. So we've got ULs, unordered list items, but we also have these little goobers. We did this the other week. Sections, that's how we did it. So we said section, and it might have just a UL in it, or it might also have, whatchamacallits, an H5 in there with it. Yeah, that's what we did. So what do we got? We got introduction. I was a little more behaved about test data when I did this design. I know last time I was typing like hot dogs and all kinds of stuff. Alright, so in this one we'll put that up there. So for now, that's the topic, like the design. Let that repeat. It's halfway decent. And what's the font there? It's also active. If you're a style components fan, you may be wondering why I'm not using nesting too much. And that is because I have Vietnam grade flashbacks from one of my first jobs. I got yelled at when I was first learning to write Sass. Some guy was not happy with me nesting, and so I always just instinctively do it that way now, which I guess has its perks, but I won't say his name, but he knows who he is. Font, that's what we're after. So we're gonna say, there you go, because we're gonna need that to apply to the H5 too. So we're gonna say font, family, active, grotesque. We don't care about font size or anything yet. That's gonna be on the individual. So we got H5. 16. That looks darker, so let's say grade 4. Okay, so before we forget, so like this is a place that I'll do nesting. So I'll just say, so I want to apply this to every section but the last one. And what I'm after is the margin bottom, so we can separate the sections. And what's our gap? 40. So it's probably the line height and the font smushing together. That looks weird. So let's also go in and do Let's see, ULLI. We'll nest that. Because I'm going to have to style the LIs too. Actually, hold that thought. We're going to start with the A's because those are the actual elements. 16. These we also have to be aware of line height in case we have a really long one. And then what's the space? There is not a chance in hell that is 25 pixels. Well, let's see what it looks like, but I have a feeling that's going to look hideous. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm often wrong. Let's see here. Margin bottom. I'm going to do 10. Yeah, okay. I was going to say. Alright, and these by default are like a gray 3. No, 2. Might be a little, well, what's it look like on the stream? Not bad. Oh my goodness. I just realized I'm not live. I've been sitting here streaming this whole time and I never went live. YouTube made me think I was live. Well, let's go ahead and turn it on. Oh my goodness. Oh, well, that's a bummer. Well, I guess I'll re-upload it later. Yeah, I'm sitting here thinking I'm on, but it is not on. Now it is. Okay. All right, well, at least I got to practice in. So let's keep going. But yeah, I'll upload this. So we'll upload it later. So if you're just tuning in, I've been streaming for like over an hour now, and I didn't realize that I didn't hit the YouTube live thing. It showed up in the preview, but it hadn't flipped on the live. So I apologize if you've been waiting for me. I've been sitting here designing documentation and talking to myself apparently, but it showed a number like somebody was in here. So all right, well, so where I'm at right now is I've got a design that I came up with since the last live stream, and basically what I did was said, okay, the existing design that I had kind of sucked, the one that we worked on the first live stream, and so what I did was I took some time to actually mock out a design, and this is what I came up with. So what I've been working through for about the past hour now is getting the layout done in here. And we're getting pretty far. So if you're just tuning in, this is actually a pretty good spot to jump on. So what I'm doing now is working on the navigation design that we've got over here. So let's see. We've got documentation. What was I doing? ULI, get rid of the text decorations. Say text decoration none, and then I want to make sure that the H5 gets a little space here. Actually, you know what, we're gonna go off the design. We'll say 25 pixels. Oh, I feel like I gotta repeat everything now, because I was giving out all sorts of tips. Well, I was just thinking I'm gonna upload this after this, so you'll be able to see the full thing. It won't be a limited stream, so hopefully I can replace it. If not, I'll upload it as a separate clip either later tonight or sometime tomorrow, so you'll be able to watch the whole thing with all the details. So let's see here. LIA. Ah, right. So you've got a hover state, which is going to be like a gray 1. Or no, other direction. Gray 3. There we go. Nice. And then we also need an active class. So we're going to go back to our markup. I don't remember. Well, actually, maybe I do. Does it add the active class? No. You know, I'm not going to futz with that right now. So I'll do, let's do a class name on the LI. And if I need to move it later, I can. So this is when you're in that current page in the navigation, or on that current page in the navigation. Let's see here. Documentation body, side section, ULLIA. Oh, that's because we just added that. Okay, so I want to say li.active. I'm going to say the active one is gray 3. Good. And then we also want to have a little pseudo attribute. So we're going to say content display block, and I think we're going to want to set position relative on the A tag. Because we're going to need to position absolute this element. And so when I say this element, what I'm talking about is this little doohickey here. So part of the design on the left is to have the current navigation item lit up. And we'll have to come up with something a little more clever in terms of the nested navigation. So we're going to say, well, yeah, let me just do that. It should be left 25. That's probably going to be a little bit more or less. Just the background. Say warning to get the cheat code yellow. And then say bottom 0 pixels. Did I do that correctly? I might have done it too far. Where are you? Content. Oh, it doesn't have a width. I was gonna say, where are you? About 5 pixels. Yeah, there it is. Okay, and to get the height right, sometimes you can do this with these guys. So what if I say top 5? All right, does it let me do it down here? Yeah, okay. Hopefully you can see that on the stream. Pull that in. So you get a nice highlighted element when you're on that page. And this is static right now, so I'm not actually relying on the routing. So if you're just joining, what I was doing earlier, or what I've been doing this whole time, is using the Next.js boilerplate from CheatCode. So if you haven't gotten a copy of it, or you haven't played with it yet, head over to github.com/cheatcode/Next.js boilerplate. And that's what we're using for this. So right now we're just doing this all front end, but likely our next live stream will be getting into the details of actually wiring this thing up. So hopefully I'll have some time over the next few days to flesh out the design, and then the next time we meet we'll do the actual back end stuff for this. So that is pretty good. And I didn't really come up with a design for nested elements, so I'm going to do that now, kind of on the fly here while we're working, and then just do it by ear or do it by eye. So in order to do that, we're going to set up a UL. And this position doesn't have any relevance. I'm just doing this arbitrarily. Just going to say link href. I'll say just a child 1. And this is going to add a bunch of them in there so we can get the spacing right. So this should look kind of crappy. Yeah. But not too bad, actually. That's better than I expected. So we got to be careful here. We're going to make sure, I'm going to split these up so I don't break my brain thinking about the nesting. So we're going to say a side section UL because the style should be the same for the most part. And I'm going to say UL like that. So I just realized, we got to make sure our nesting is specific because we, or no, we don't. No, we don't. No, we don't. I take that back. Should be okay if it breaks one. So I'm going to do that. It's going to look chunky, but all right. I got to be less self-deprecating here because apparently it's working in my favor. Everything's looking at Millhouse. But that doesn't need to be margin. That needs to be padding. Because I want to add a border and I want the border to be flush. So I'm going to say gray 1. Okay. So what we really want, something like that. Yeah. Okay, so we want to mix margin and padding. So we're going to say margin. We do want margin top and bottom, but not left and right. Ooh. Spacing's a little off. Is that about 5 pixels? What's going on? Wait, did that say P tag or an LI tag? LI tag. The LI tags have line height, so it looks, for some reason that's bugging my eyes. Nah, okay, I take it back. 20 is pretty good. Okay, and then we need to add an active class for a nested one and make sure, let's do this now. So we're gonna say, nested child has a crazy long name that is too long. Yeah, not bad. Right. So the cool part is we can steal this. Actually, I'm thinking through all this. It's like, no, that style should apply. We might have to get the padding right, but that should work. So let's just use this crazy long name one and see what it looks like. See, people hate on the cascading of CSS, but I love stuff like that. Yeah, that's cool. All right, so I'm going to move it down to 1 just so it's not clashing with the other one. Visually, just for testing. Ooh, don't delete it. Yeah, that's cool. Very cool. Okay, so this is when you have nested nav. Let's add another section with the title just to see how that looks. And then I just realized, actually we're going to add a bunch of these. And you missed this earlier because I wasn't actually streaming. I was streaming, but I wasn't streaming like a doofus. What I made a point about was I'm just using hard-coded data here. I'm not actually wiring this up to a backend yet. So when you see me pasting things over and over, I'm not saying go do that. I'm saying like this is just for testing. And the reason I did it is you'll notice we got to make sure there's an overflow in the navigation. So if it goes past the bottom of the screen, we can just scroll it. So to do it, we need to find our aside style. And we're set overflow XY. I always have to do that for some reason. I have to draw like the grid with my hand. There we go. So now we get a nice scroll bar. Nice and simple. Maybe later we'll do like a fancy pinning of the topic name or something. Okay, so I don't want to toot my own horn, but beep beep. This was, I'm glad I came back with this design because the other one was sucked. All right. It's ironic because I've only been streaming for 30 minutes live, but I'm getting kind of tired because I've been doing this about an hour and a half now. Well, let's keep going just for the folks watching. I'll go a little bit further. So yeah, let's get at least this done. That should take us about 20, 30 minutes. So we need to get a content div. Oh, I missed yeah, we'll come back to the version selector. That's kind of tedious, and I want to see like the overall design fleshed out before we finish up here tonight. So actually I'm hovering over it right now. I was trying to think like what's the structure. So we already have the main content area, but I need a subdiv that's split in two. And that little goober over there, what are we gonna do with that? Position sticky. Yeah, okay. So I'm gonna leave all that stuff in there, but I'm gonna collapse the aside in my HTML so I'm not scrolling up and down. So what did I just say? So we had a content div in the middle of the main. That is going to be split into two. So that's going to have one div, which is going to be documentation content, the actual content. So I'm just going to put some junk in there as well. So testing. And then we're going to have an aside for that little sub navigation. And that we can just, where am I looking? Yeah, for this, I think I'm going to mimic the same styles that I have over here. So what we just did in the nav, something like that, because then it's really consistent and can be kind of lazy. Yeah. So what was I doing? I'm getting old. I started mumbling. Aside. Okay. So I'm going to use this instinctive. No, I'm not. I'm going to use one of these instinctively. There we go. And then let's collapse that back down. Okay. Now I just noticed that this is screwing up the other thing. So, and the way I was able to see it is just over the years. I mean, I've been doing this stuff for about 14, 15 years now. So my eye will see stuff almost immediately. And I'll, for whatever reason, just from experience, know what I'm looking at. So the thing I saw was, oh, I just wrapped this sidebar in an aside tag, but for some reason it's got padding and a border right already. And the reason why is that the outer parent of all this has styles for this aside, the actual side, the navigation bar for the whole docs. So those styles were cascading down. So I jumped back over and I was like, oh, well, I need to make sure that it's using the immediate child selector. So that way I know that it's only that immediate aside, not the others. So now that I've done that, that style is ripped off of the nested aside because now it's more specific. Woo! So, let's see here. We got to go to what? So I put that class here. So I was talking about this earlier. So basically trying to decide like how do I want to name this, because I used to use CSS methodologies in the past, but I got too geeky with them, and so I just wasted a bunch of time going down the rabbit hole instead of actually doing the work. So now I just try and do like vanilla class names and, you know, make it fairly human readable if I can. So what I'm thinking here is documentation content technically specifies that entire, so instead of drawing with my hands into this, so this is the content of the documentation, including the navigation. And then, yeah, okay. So I'm just going to say documentation content. And then we'll worry about semantics and stuff later. So documentation content. What's the width on that? So this is 1450. So I'm going to give it a max width. And then I'm also going to say think I wrote a main style. No, I didn't. No. Okay. So we're going to say documentation body. Yeah, documentation body. I gotcha. Okay. So we're going to say documentation body main like that. So same problem as we saw before. We want to make sure that we're being very, very specific here. So this is going to be display flex and justify content center. And did I do that correctly? Let's go into the inspector. Main. Perhaps. Ah, it doesn't have a width. So I'm going to say width. There you go. So that's part of it. But now the actual main div. Yeah, so we're going to say main div. We want to match that. That might actually be the way to do it. Max width. Oh, duh. So max and min. Yeah, okay. So this is something I ran into earlier with the layout because you're using Flexbox. So when you use a width 100% on a parent, you have to be more specific. If you want a specific width on the children, you have to set it explicitly. And so you have to do min width and max width to say, like, don't try to dynamically adjust the width, set it fixed to this. So, which is kind of interesting because if I set just 1450 by itself, typically Flexbox ignores that. No, it didn't. Okay. Not what I expected. I'll take it. Never mind me. Oh, but we don't want that. That's part of the problem. Because I do want it to, you know, thinking through this. Yeah, there you go. Duh. Like I said, I'm getting sleepy. I'm getting old. All right. So what I just did was I said, make sure that this div attempts to take up 100% of its parent, but set a max width on that expansion up to 1450 pixels. So that way I know, like on a really big monitor like this one, it's just going to center out. It's not going to like go all the way out. And that's valuable when you're dealing with things like line length, which affect readability. And I want to make sure, because this is technical docs, that you can actually read it instead of just kind of look at it. These things are important. Though some may protest. Okay, so now I'm looking at the structure here. So we got main div. Yeah, so this sucker also needs to be display flex. There we go. And then we want our aside in there. And this time I technically don't have to do the nested child selector because it's the lowest, whatchamacallit, nested child or nested instance of an aside tag. So I don't have to do a child specificity selector. So I'm going to say on this margin left auto. Nice. So we want that to jump over there. And then the thing I said earlier is we're going to use this nested style. At least we're going to try. So that would be this. Yeah. And how did I do it? I said aside UL. So I'm going to copy this. And then say aside UL. And alright, so that got us part of the way there. But then we also need the UL-LI styles. So let's do this set. I gotta get all these, but we'll do this one first, so I don't get confused. Let's see here. What am I trying to do? I'm trying to say nested LI, LIA. That should get us part of the way there. And then we needed an active state. And we need to make sure that that looks right. So we're going to match the font with the navigation. Nice. Okay. So, and notice how this name is like pushing this thing all the way over. So what we want to do is set a max width on that aside. So I'm going to instinctively put it at 250, and we can get a little more of that. Yeah, all right, that looks decent. And then we need, and we are going to put a space in here. I just haven't done it yet. Let's see here. We're going to do active style. That's what I'm after. And actually, if you're an old clever Beagle follower, I already came up with the JavaScript to do the automatic highlighting when you scroll of this. So what we'll likely do in the next stream is implement stuff like that in addition to the back end. It should be fun, because that was a pain in the butt to write. And actually, I don't even know if the code is good, because I did it 3 years ago now, 4 years ago. Side UL LI active. Oh, I didn't do the styles, did I? No. We need you. And in case you're wondering, is there a more efficient or clean way to do this? Yes. But I'm gonna have to pull that old card again. So like, well, too bad, youngster. I don't care. This is how we're doing it. Put your seatbelt on and quit hitting your sister. Okay. Documentation. Okay, so that's what I want to force down. And I think I got rid of it. Yeah, I did. So I'm going to pull this. Actually, I don't even have to pull that. I can get away with doing that because it's a singular class. And then what's the actual design call for? Was it 80 to 100? Yep, 100. Yeah. So we still got to worry about mobile, but once you get to the, okay, so this is actually worth covering because even, well, I don't know what size, that's probably about 1200, 1400 pixels. So we shouldn't have it smushed to the edge like that. So we're going to want to make sure. So I'm going to put any on this. All right, now we get out the nerd tools. So we're going to use Xscope. And we're going to turn on, if I can remember, let me use this in a little bit. Isn't there a window for this thing? Where is it? I'm not going to remember. Dang. What I'm trying to do is get a vertical guide on my screen. And I know you can do it with this, but I'm not remembering. Did it float? There's like a little window that pops up for this thing, but I'm not seeing it on my screen anywhere. Ah, well. Alright, I'm going to do it this way. So I talked about this earlier, but using the screenshot tool on Mac OS, you can get a nice crosshair with a pixel amount. So I can kind of guesstimate. So that's about 16 pixels off. So let me walk it to 30. Yeah, okay. So that's getting us there. And again, I'll perfect it once we get the CMS actually wired up. So the back end for this wired up and we actually have some real content, because otherwise it's kind of a farce to sit here and worry about, especially if my concern isn't on mobile or smaller screens just yet. Yeah. So actually, let's do that. And that'll be the last thing we do tonight. So let's get some lorem ipsum IO. Yeah. So we'll take this. And where's my test data? We're not worried about perfection right now. We just want to get something. Yeah, okay. That's why I wanted to do that. So we're going to do this in the browser first, and then we'll copy the styles over. So documentation. Yeah, okay, I was doing that right. So documentation content, we're going to say max width 50%. 60%. And actually, can I get away with pixels to make sure my reading length is correct? 725. Let's see here. So we're gonna say copy this again. We can get away with that because the other thing is an aside that's in there with it. What did I just say? I said max was 725. I'll do a refresh, make sure I clear out the browser styles. Nice, okay. Might tweak that as we go here, but because we are dealing with code and this font size is going to change. Actually, let's do that now. So what I'll ultimately do for this is come up with a more hardcore style for the layout. And what I'm looking for right now, I don't think I have this. No, I don't. I was looking for it in the Next.js boilerplate, but I should do that. I was looking for it. Usually what I'll do is I'll create a React component that has my default like document or blog post styles in it, and then I just wrap my content with that component to get the styles automatically. So I'll likely do that at some point as part of this. But for now, we're just going to set some arbitrary styles just to make it look pretty. And then we'll wrap up here for the night. So 24. And again, if you're just tuning in and you're like, why didn't he start at 8 o'clock? It's like, well, technically I did. I just didn't click the stupid go live button in YouTube because I thought it clicked on automatically. So I apologize if you showed up and were waiting for me. What you gonna do? Now I've learned my lesson. I'll pay attention. But the good thing is I recorded it, so you can watch it on your own schedule later. Let's do Gray 3. Let's get in the ballpark. Yeah, pretty close. And I'm going to kick that up by 2 pixels. Not bad. All right, so, and then what did I put in there? An H4? Oh, I did them in sizes, so what's this one? 24 pixels. And we'll give that 34 pixels, and then margin bottom 20 pixels. Not half bad. is part one of however many it's going to take us to get this documentation going, but I'm pretty happy with that progress because now we've got something that's a little more concrete, and I like that it's a standalone site because there's going to be all kinds of stuff over the next few years coming from CheatCode. So yeah, it'll be nice to have an independent documentation site where I can just add new documentation without having to mess with the actual main site. I think that'll be good. Also offload traffic and stuff because search is going to be added and add some weight to this, so that'll be good. So even though you only got to see a little bit of it, hopefully this was entertaining. Hopefully this is interesting. Like I said, I did record this, so I'll be uploading it. Try and do it tonight, depending on the whatchamacallit, the buffering time or whatever it is for the recording. This should be pretty quick. But if not, I'll upload it tomorrow and I'll post a tweet. And by the way, if you're not already, follow on Twitter at CheatCodeTuts, at CheatCode TUTS. I've been posting quite a bit of stuff there, so as I do updates to the boilerplates or as new content is released, I'll talk about it there. And also sign up at cheatcode.co/newsletter, and that is the newsletter that I send out every week, and that includes similar stuff, but it's more of the, summary, as it were, of all of the tutorials I've done, any new course updates, which you want to keep an eye on because I am actively working on the first course for the site. So I'm going to be talking about that in there, and then I'll also do live stream announcements. So instead of me just kind of like randomly be like, yeah, okay, I'm going to live stream, you'll get a better heads up by reading the newsletter. So definitely check that out. So yeah, I think that covers everything. I'm tired. I'm ready to go to bed. So thank you for all you that showed up, tuned in, and thank you to anybody who's watching this after the fact. I appreciate it. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.